What happens when Hollywood royalty walks onto a talk show expecting respect, only to be met with mockery and condescension that spirals into one of the most shocking exits in television history? In just 39 seconds, one smug comment from the host would turn a routine interview into an explosive confrontation that ended with security escorting a legendary actor off the set. Samuel L. Jackson settled into the guest chair on Jon Stewart's late-night show, expecting the usual promotional interview for his latest film. The audience applauded as the cameras rolled, but something felt different tonight. Stewart had a look in his eyes, a certain smugness that suggested he had something planned. Something that would make headlines. "So, Samuel," Stewart began, leaning back in his chair with an almost dismissive wave. "Another action movie. How original." The audience laughed nervously. Jackson smiled, trying to keep things light. "Well, I do what I do best. The fans love it." Stewart smirked. "The fans. Right. Tell me something. Do you ever get tired of playing the same character over and over? I mean, at what point does it become, I don't know, a little embarrassing?" The smile faded slightly from Jackson's face. "I'm sorry, what?" "I'm just saying," Stewart continued, clearly enjoying himself now. "You've been doing this angry tough guy thing for how long now? 20 years? 30? Don't you think it's time to, I don't know, actually act?" The audience went quiet. This wasn't the usual playful banter. This was something else entirely. Jackson sat forward, his voice measured but firm. "Jon, I've done over 150 films. I've worked with every major director in Hollywood. I think I know a little something about acting." Stewart laughed, actually laughed out loud. 150 films? Congratulations. McDonald's has served billions. Quantity doesn't equal quality, my friend. "I'm not your friend," Jackson said coldly. "Ooh, there it is," Stewart said, turning to the audience with theatrical flair. "There's that trademark Samuel L. Jackson intensity. Tell me, is that the only note you can play? Is that the only emotion in your arsenal?" Jackson's jaw tightened. "You want to see range? You want to see emotion? How about this? I'm sitting here wondering who hurt you, Jon. Who made you so bitter that you'd invite someone onto your show just to disrespect them?" Stewart's smile didn't waver. "Disrespect? I'm just asking questions. Real questions. Not the softball nonsense you're used to getting from entertainment reporters who kiss your feet. Someone needs to be honest with you." "Honest?" Jackson's voice rose slightly. "You think this is honest? This is you trying to look smart by tearing someone else down. This is you hiding behind your desk in your audience because you know you couldn't last 5 minutes doing what I do." "What you do," Stewart said with a dismissive chuckle. "Which is what exactly? Glare at the camera? Say some curse words? Collect a paycheck? Please. My interns work harder than you do." The audience gasped audibly. This had crossed a line. Jackson stood up slowly, removing his microphone. "You know what? I'm done here. I came on this show out of respect for what I thought it was. But this isn't an interview. This is a roast, and I didn't sign up for it." Stewart leaned forward, that smirk still plastered across his face. "Oh, come on, Samuel. Can't take a little criticism? I thought you were tough. Isn't that your whole brand?" "My brand," Jackson said, his voice low and dangerous, "is being a professional, something you clearly know nothing about. You want tough? How about this? You're not clever, Jon. You're not edgy. You're just mean. And that desk you're hiding behind doesn't make you better than anyone." Stewart's face flushed red. "Excuse me? You're going to stand there and lecture me about professionalism? You, who built an entire career on saying the same lines in different colored shirts?" "At least I have a career based on talent," Jackson shot back. "What's yours based on? Reading jokes other people write for you? Making fun of people who actually create things while you just sit there and commentate?" Stewart's eyes narrowed. "I create conversation. I create dialogue. I ask the questions that need to be asked." "You create nothing," Jackson said flatly. "You tear down. There's a difference. Any fool can criticize. It takes no talent, no skill, no courage. But to actually get up in front of a camera and create something, to put yourself out there and risk failure, that takes guts. Something you clearly don't have, sitting safely behind your desk every night." "My desk," Stewart said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This desk represents credibility. It represents authority. It represents viewers trusting me to ask the hard questions." "Hard questions," Jackson repeated, shaking his head. "Is that what you call what you've been doing? Asking me if I'm embarrassed by my career? Comparing my work to McDonald's? Those aren't hard questions, John. Those are cheap shots. Those are the kinds of insults a bully throws around on a playground. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some people looked away, not wanting to watch this anymore. Others leaned forward, unable to look away from the train wreck unfolding before them. "Oh, so now I'm a bully," Stewart said, his voice rising. "That's rich. That's really rich. You know what I think? I think you came here expecting me to kiss the ring, to fawn over you like every other interviewer does. And when I didn't, when I actually treated you like a regular person who should be able to defend their career choices, you couldn't handle it. Treated me like a regular person?" Jackson's voice was incredulous. "You've done nothing but insult me from the moment I sat down. You've questioned my talent, mocked my choices, dismissed my entire body of work, and you want to call that treating me like a regular person?" "I call it honesty," Stewart insisted. "I call it not giving special treatment just because someone is famous. Everyone else in this town is too afraid to tell you the truth. Well, I'm not afraid. The truth," Jackson said slowly, "is that you invited me here under false pretenses. You told my people this would be a standard interview about my new film. Instead, you had this whole attack planned out. You wanted to make yourself look smart by making me look bad. That's not bravery, John. That's cowardice." Stewart laughed, but it sounded forced now. "Cowardice? I'm sitting here facing you, aren't I? I'm not backing down from anything I've said." "No, you're sitting behind your desk," Jackson corrected. "You're in your studio, surrounded by your staff, backed by your producers, protected by your security. You have all the power here, and you're using it to punch down at someone who came here as your guest. If that's not cowardice, I don't know what is." The audience was completely silent now, all eyes bouncing between the two men like watching a tennis match. Stewart stood up from his desk, something he rarely did during interviews. "You want to go there? Fine, let's go there. You think you're some kind of artist? You're a product. You're a brand name that studios slap on posters to sell tickets. There's no art in what you do. There's no craft. You're a marketing tool." Jackson took a step toward the desk. "And you're a failed comedian who found a niche insulting people smarter and more successful than you'll ever be. You want to talk about my career? Let's talk about yours. What happens when this show ends, John? What happens when they don't give you a desk to hide behind anymore? You think anyone's going to remember you?" Stewart's face was bright red now, his composure cracking. "Get off my stage." "Gladly," Jackson said, turning toward the exit. "No, security," Stewart called out, his voice shaking slightly. "Get him off my stage. Get him out of here." Two security guards appeared from the wings, looking uncomfortable. Jackson held up his hands. "I'm going. Trust me, I don't want to be here any more than you want me here." But Stewart wasn't done. As Jackson walked toward the exit, the host's voice rang out across the studio. "That's right, walk away. That's what you do best, isn't it? Walk away when things get real. Stick to your script, Samuel. Stick to what you know." Jackson stopped dead in his tracks. The entire studio held its breath. Slowly, he turned around. "What I know," Jackson said, his voice carrying across the silent room, "is that respect is earned, not demanded. And you, Jon Stewart, have earned nothing from me tonight except pity. Pity that you're so insecure about your own relevance that you have to try to tear down someone who was already a legend before you even had a show." "Legend," Stewart scoffed, but his voice cracked slightly. "Legend in your own mind, maybe. Tell you what," Jackson said, walking back toward the desk. The security guards moved to intercept him, but he waved them off. "Why don't we let the audience decide? Why don't we let them vote on who they respect more right now? The host who invited a guest on his show just to mock and belittle him? Or the guest who's trying to maintain some dignity while being attacked?" The audience remained silent, but the energy in the room had shifted. People were looking at Stewart differently now, and he could feel it. "This is my show," Stewart said, but the confidence was gone from his voice. "I ask the questions here." "Then ask better questions," Jackson said simply. "Ask questions that come from curiosity instead of cruelty. Ask questions that make your guests want to open up instead of shut down. Be the interviewer you pretend to be in all those award show clips they play when they celebrate you." Stewart's mouth opened and closed like a fish. For once, he had no comeback. His writers had prepared jokes and quips for every possible direction the interview might go. But this complete breakdown, this public humiliation, there was no script for this. "You know what your problem is?" Jackson continued, his voice calm but cutting. You've forgotten what it's like to be vulnerable. You sit up here every night, safe and protected, and you tear apart everyone else. Politicians, celebrities, regular people who make mistakes, you mock them all. But you never put yourself on the line. You never take the risk of being wrong or looking foolish. You hide behind satire and claim it's all just jokes. It is jokes, Stewart protested weakly. It's comedy. It's what I do. Then where's the funny? Jackson asked, gesturing around the silent studio. Nobody's laughing, Jon. You crossed the line from comedy into cruelty about 10 minutes ago, and you're too stubborn to admit it. Stewart's hands gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles white. You don't get to come on my show and tell me how to do my job. Someone needs to, Jackson said, because right now, you're doing it wrong. You're hurting people for entertainment. You're using your platform to make yourself feel bigger by making your guests feel smaller. And the worst part is, you probably don't even see it. You probably think you're just being edgy or provocative or real. I am being real, Stewart insisted, but his voice cracked. I'm the only one in this whole fake industry who's willing to say what everyone else is thinking. No, Jackson said firmly. You're saying what you're thinking. And what you're thinking is mean-spirited and small-minded. The audience isn't thinking these things. Your viewers at home aren't thinking these things. This is all you, Jon. This is your insecurity and your need to feel superior. Don't blame that on anyone else. The words hung in the air like smoke. Stewart looked out at his audience, searching for support, for someone to laugh or clap or do something to break the tension, but they just stared back at him, their faces a mixture of shock and disappointment. You want real? Jackson continued. Here's real. I've been acting for longer than you've been alive. I've studied my craft, honed my skills, worked with the best in the business. I've taken roles that challenged me, roles that scared me, roles that pushed me to grow as an artist. And yes, I've also taken roles that paid well, roles in big action movies that let me do what I love while supporting my family and my future. That's not selling out. That's being smart. That's having a career, not just a moment. Stewart tried to interrupt, but Jackson wasn't finished. Meanwhile, Jackson said, his voice building, you sit here night after night reading jokes written by a team of writers, making fun of people who are actually out there doing things, creating things, building things, risking things. You can risk nothing, Jon. You create nothing. You just tear down what others have built and call it commentary. That's not fair, Stewart said, his voice barely above a whisper now. Fair? Jackson's eyebrows shot up. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you called my life's work embarrassing? Was it fair when you compared me to fast food? Was it fair when you told me I couldn't act? You want to talk to me about fair? Stewart had no answer. He looked down at his desk, at his notes, at anything but Jackson's eyes. I've been doing this a long time, Jackson continued, his voice softer now, but no less powerful. And I've sat across from hundreds of interviewers, some good, some bad, some great. You could have been great, Jon. You have the platform, you have the audience, you have the opportunity. But instead, you chose this. You chose to be small. Get out, Stewart said quietly. I already tried to, Jackson reminded him. You're the one who wanted to make a scene. You're the one who called security like I was some kind of threat. All I did was stand up and try to leave with my dignity intact. Security, Stewart said again, louder this time. Please escort Mr. Jackson from the building. The guards moved in, positioned on either side of Jackson. He didn't resist, didn't argue. He simply looked at Stewart one more time and shook his head slowly. You know what the saddest part of this is? Jackson asked. I actually used to watch your show. I used to think you were one of the good ones. Someone who used comedy to speak truth to power, not to punch down at people just trying to do their jobs. I guess I was wrong. You're wrong about a lot of things, Stewart muttered, but there was no force behind it. As the security guards began to walk Jackson toward the exit, the actor stopped one more time. Hey, Jon, one more thing. Stewart looked up, exhausted and angry. What? Good luck with the rest of your show tonight, Jackson said. You're going to need it. And with that, Samuel L. Jackson walked out of the studio, flanked by security guards, leaving behind a host who suddenly looked very small behind his big desk, and an audience that sat in stunned, uncomfortable silence. Stewart tried to recover, tried to make a joke to break the tension. Well, that was something. Let's go to commercial. But the damage was done. The cameras had captured everything. The audience had seen everything. And the look on Jon Stewart's face, the look of someone who had pushed too far and knew it, told everyone watching that this wasn't how the night was supposed to go. In the wings, Jackson handed his microphone to a production assistant. "Thank you," he said politely, as if nothing had happened. Then he walked out the stage door into the night, his head held high. Back in the studio, Stewart sat at his desk during the commercial break, his writers and producers rushing over to do damage control. But what could they say? What could anyone say? The host had invited a respected actor onto his show and had spent the entire interview insulting him, questioning his talent, dismissing his career. And when the actor had finally had enough and tried to leave with grace, Stewart had made it worse by calling security, turning a bad interview into a spectacle. When the show came back from commercial, Stewart's energy was different. The swagger was gone. He tried to continue with his planned segments, tried to get back into his rhythm, but everyone could feel it. The audience was different now, quieter, less willing to laugh at his jokes. They had seen him be cruel, and they couldn't unsee it. Stewart made it through the rest of the show, but barely. His timing was off, his jokes fell flat, and the whole thing felt hollow. When he finally signed off for the night, the usual cheers from the audience were muted, polite instead of enthusiastic. In his dressing room, Jackson sat calmly, checking his phone. His publicist was already calling, wanting to know what happened, what to say to the press. But Jackson wasn't worried. He knew the truth of what had happened in that studio. He had walked in with respect and had been met with hostility. He had tried to keep things professional and had been mocked. He had attempted to leave peacefully and had been made into a spectacle. The truth had a way of coming out, and Jackson knew that when people saw the footage, when they heard the exchange, they would understand. He hadn't been the problem. He had simply refused to be disrespected, and in doing so, had shown more class and dignity than the man behind the desk. Meanwhile, Stewart sat in his own dressing room, replaying the interview in his mind. His producers were trying to spin it, trying to figure out how to present it to the media. But Stewart knew. He had crossed a line. He had let his ego, his need to be clever and edgy, push him into being cruel, and it had backfired spectacularly. The thing about live television is that you can't take anything back. Every word, every sneer, every dismissive comment had been captured on camera. And now, Stewart would have to live with the consequences of his choices. Back at his hotel, Jackson finally returned his publicist's call. "What do you want me to say?" she asked, her voice tense. "The truth," Jackson said simply. "I went on the show expecting a professional interview. Instead, I was insulted and belittled. When I tried to leave, the host escalated the situation. I maintained my composure and left. That's it. That's the whole story." "The press is going to eat this up," she warned. "Let them," Jackson said. "I did nothing wrong. I stood up for myself. If that's controversial, then so be it." And he meant it. In his decades in Hollywood, Samuel L. Jackson had earned his place at the table through hard work, talent, and professionalism. He had worked with the best directors, starred in some of the most successful films ever made, and had built a reputation as someone who showed up, did the work, and treated people with respect. One bad interview with an insecure host wasn't going to change that. If anything, it would remind people of something important, that respect goes both ways, that having a platform doesn't give you the right to tear people down. That true professionalism means knowing when to stand your ground. The studio audience filed out into the night, already texting friends, already sharing what they had witnessed. This wasn't going to be one of those moments that faded away quietly. This was going to be talked about, debated, analyzed. People would take sides, argue about who was right and who was wrong. But for Jackson, it was simple. He had been disrespected, and he had refused to accept it. He had tried to handle it gracefully, and when that didn't work, he had walked away. There was no shame in that. There was no regret. Stewart, on the other hand, would spend the coming days trying to manage the fallout, trying to explain what had happened, trying to justify his behavior. His team would work overtime to control the narrative, to spin the story in his favor, but the footage didn't lie, and the audience had seen what they had seen. In the end, this moment would become a case study in how not to conduct an interview. It would be shown in journalism classes and discussed in media circles. It would be a reminder that having power doesn't mean you should abuse it, and that sometimes the person who walks away is the one who wins. Jackson ordered room service, turned on a movie, and relaxed. He had handled himself well, and he knew it. Tomorrow there would be calls and meetings, and probably some kind of statement to release. But tonight, he was at peace. Stewart, meanwhile, sat alone in his office long after everyone else had gone home. The lights were dim, the building was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, he questioned himself. Had he gone too far? Had he let his need to be provocative override his basic sense of decency? The answers weren't comfortable ones. In the control room, producers were already going through the footage, trying to decide how much to edit, how much to leave in. But they all knew that in the age of social media and camera phones, someone in the audience had probably already recorded the whole thing on their phone. The full, unedited confrontation would be out there soon enough, no matter what they decided to air. And when it did get out, when people saw the full context of what had happened, the court of public opinion would make its judgment. Some would defend Stewart, arguing that tough interviews are part of the job, that celebrities should be able to handle criticism. Others would side with Jackson, pointing out that there's a difference between tough questions and personal attacks, between challenging someone and insulting them. But the people who were actually there, the audience members who had watched it unfold in real time, they already knew the truth. They had seen the look on Jackson's face when the insults started. They had heard the change in his voice when he tried to maintain his professionalism despite being provoked. They had witnessed his dignity when he finally stood up to leave, and his restraint when Stewart tried to make it worse. They had also seen Stewart's face, the moment when he realized he had gone too far but couldn't stop himself from continuing. The moment when his need to win the exchange overrode his common sense. The moment when he called security, turning what could have been a regrettable but private disagreement into a public spectacle. Those audience members would tell their friends, who would tell their friends, and soon the story would spread beyond just what the cameras captured. The human element, the feeling in the room, the sense that something had gone terribly wrong, that would be part of the story too. Jackson's phone buzzed, with messages of support from fellow actors, directors, friends in the industry who had heard what happened and wanted him to know they had his back. Some shared their own stories of difficult interviews, times when they had been made to feel small or disrespected. The entertainment industry could be brutal, and everyone had their war stories. But this felt different. This wasn't a case of a journalist asking tough questions or a critic offering harsh but fair analysis. This was a host who had used his platform to belittle a guest, and when that guest had tried to leave with dignity, had made the situation worse by involving security and creating a scene. There was no defending that, no matter how you spun it. Stewart's writers, his loyal team who had been with him